Mini albums. Chances are that you've probably heard of them and maybe you love them, hate them or are indifferent, but I get so many questions about mini albums. I mean, for a start, it's do we need them? Why are bands producing so many of them? And then also the questions like, well, isn't a mini album just what we used to call an EP? So, well, I'm kind of here to waffle about that, and this is one of these unscripted videos that I'm gonna post some of these about questions that I often get asked. Give my opinions. Feel free to ask me if there's any other subjects that you want me to give my completely wise and always correct opinion on. So first of all, let's get into that first one. Why do we even have mini albums? Why? Are they EPs? Is it the same thing? And then we'll talk about whether bands should be doing them. Well, in regards to whether it's just an EP, there's kind of two sides to that. I mean, first of all, if you were just looking at literally what we expect from a mini album, well, yeah, it's the difference between having a normal full-length album. Let's see, I've got props for this one. Or a track that only has a CD that only has 5 tracks on it. So, I mean, that's a lot like what EPs used to be. Just very short albums, just a collection of songs that was too long to be a single. I mean, a single, maybe you can get away with 2 B-sides on it, but once you've got 5 tracks, and it's too short to be an album because, it's not something that you can expect people to pay full album prices for because, you're going to want to at least have 10 tracks to make it an album, or at least have a runtime of like over 45 minutes or something. Well, in that sense, an EP and a mini album are the same thing. However, there's something a little bit more important to it as far as I'm concerned, which is the thought process, the purpose behind them. See, what we're calling mini albums now, I kind of think they literally are mini albums. They're written like that. They tend to be a case of a band sitting down in one sitting thinking, okay, we want to make an album, but we're not going to, we want to produce something with a fairly quick turnover. We don't want to have to wait the time it takes to completely create a whole list of 10, 12 songs, get the inspiration for all of them. I mean, it's not like you just suddenly come up with all of these songs. They might come from different places, different times in your life. It can it can take a year or two to create a proper album. And so a mini album is something where they're saying, well, we want to do that. We want to have an official release of new music, but we don't want to take all the time it takes to come up with that many songs. And in a way, there's something honourable about that because, of course, it's the case of, well, we don't want to just sort of produce filler to create enough songs. But then again, I can see some people seeing it as cynical, just like, well, let's get something out quickly so that we can get people still paying for, CD releases on a fairly regular basis. Well, I mean, again, before we move on to the commercial side, I think that in itself, that approach to how the mini albums are made is enough to make them different from EPs. Because EPs of old, it was a bit of a vague definition. I mean, I heard EPs, where literally, like I said before, it was just a single that had, maybe 4 B-sides. Maybe they'd been overacted, they had a bunch of songs, and they just wanted to put them somewhere, so they called it an EP. And then the EP would just be in the name of the first track, so it was effectively just a long single. I've seen that come up. I've seen EPs where it was just a collection of some live songs that wasn't long enough to be a live album, so maybe they just put like one new song on there and then a few live tracks afterwards. I've seen EPs where, yeah, they were kind of like mini albums, but they were recorded a bit roughly, just some songs that weren't good enough to get on an album, so they were just like, hey, let's record these, a band who's got a wealth of B-sides, so they just, there was all kinds of reasons, whereas a mini album is never like that. A mini album is always exactly what it says. It's a mini album. It's an attempt to create something entirely new. So I think that the concept of a mini album is legit. And furthermore, for anyone who's getting romantic about the old expression of an EP, I mean, apart from the fact that, like I said, it's kind of vague, remember that just in the same way that that's vague, the concept of an album. Now, this is a little bit before my time, but I'm pretty sure that an album and an LP merged into one thing, but didn't it used to be that an album itself was like, it was called an album because it opened like a book. It was 2 records, and an LP was a long singular record. I mean, these terms are not as defined. I'm pretty sure they're not as defined as we like to think they are. We just tend to go with the terms that were around as we grew up, which is fair enough, but I do think that, and I don't believe we should just change terms for the sake of it, but I think mini album legit is actually meaning something, and it's becoming, the mini albums are becoming something much more set, something much more defined than an EP ever used to be. And I also think, once again, it holds the artist's feet to the fire and makes them actually have to produce something that feels like a mini album rather than just stuffing enough things on there to get 4 or 5 tracks and then charge you for it. So mini albums, I'm all for them. Now here's the next question. Do we need them? Now this is an interesting one. I'm holding up the 2 GACHARIC SPIN CDs, Ace and W, full-length album, Ace EP came out soon afterwards. Now, of course, it's interesting in GACHARIC SPIN's case because they did both of these quite close to each other. But then you get other bands who will release full-length albums pretty much only. And then some bands who seem to release a lot of mini albums. And my mind at the moment is kind of going towards, specifically, I'm thinking of TRiDENT, who I'm a massive TRiDENT fan. It's one of the reasons why I'm wearing this right now. Because, you know, TRiDENT, they are now on their 3rd mini album and they're producing them really quickly. You know, the last mini album that we had from them, literally, I was at the tour final, you know, the last day, the last event of the tour for that mini album, and they played a new song and said, this is the first single off of our new mini album that is coming out on this date. So literally there's no gap between them. It's a way of like producing CDs regularly so that there's no space between them. They come out one after the other. Is that just a cash grab? Well, I mean, as far as I'm concerned, any group could turn something like that into a cash grab. But I think it's more a case of supply and demand. I think it's a case of the world that we live in now. See, the problem is that people do have relatively short attention spans. I remember being an old boy. When I grew up, and I'm sure when a lot of you grew up, you know, an album would come out, we'd be excited, we'd listen to the album, and we wouldn't be surprised waiting like, oh, okay, we heard the album, well, see you in 2 years. You know, 2 years waiting for an album is perfectly normal. But now you think about it, a lot of bands like, you know, Baby Metal have a hiatus, a big dramatic hiatus that's less than a year, or about a year almost exactly. You know, it's something where bands have to do more to stay relevant. You've got to remember as well, without record companies curating everything that becomes famous, now that the internet allows everything to rise up, now that there's so many more artists, especially in a place like Japan where there's so much quality, I mean, there's more competition as well. It's easier for you to get replaced if you go silent. There's just more reason to be needing to be in people's faces all the time, to be releasing something all the time. It is kind of a requirement for the artist because not only do people have shorter attention spans, but there's more to stand up and take your place should you go quiet for any period of time. I mean, even now, I mean, look at all the work artists have to do on social media, like rallying up their fans. Of course, the other side of it as well is the fact that, well, physical media doesn't sell like it used to do. So you look at most CDs and, you know, I mean, even now, people who buy CDs, I've heard this so much in our community, people will buy CDs because they're really into the band, but then even once they bought the CD, most of the time they just listen to the tracks either on streaming or from their hard drive, or a lot of them, I was really shocked when we did a survey on this and I got the responses from this like a year or two ago. I was blown away by the number of people who, once they bought the album, they'll just pick out their favourite songs and listen to them as part of playlists moving forwards. So people don't sit down and listen to the CDs as much. So what are these CDs? Well, if people are not going to listen to albums as albums, and people, even if they do that, are not going to listen to them from the physical media so much, this is just merch. That's really what it is. I mean, don't get me wrong. Obviously, I'm a great proponent of CD as a format. I think it's great to have, you know, that beautiful quality audio. I love that idea. The fact that, you know, it's a physical thing, you own it. But then again, it's merch. That's what it is. It's merchandise. You're buying merchandise. Yes, it is the actual music, but you don't have to have it in that form. So effectively, you're buying it as a piece of merch, the same way as you'd buy the t-shirt, the same way that you get the hat or whatever. You know, I mean, this was given to me. I love it. I wear it in all the videos, but this was given to me. I've got to say that before, just in case the person, hi Jeff, is watching this, is like, you didn't buy that. But this is the thing. CDs now are merch. So yeah, keeping them regularly turning over makes sense, especially when you know that most people are just looking for what's your latest song so that they can skim it off and put it in a playlist. And I'm not saying that's a bad thing. It's just, you know, consume music, supply and demand, however you like to consume music, however it works for you, however it keeps the industry going and these artists alive, I'm for it. But supply and demand works in many ways, and the industry is supply and demand, and we can't blame it for being an industry. You know, people have to get paid, people have to do the work. And supply and demand seems to dictate that we are overrun with choice, and that as well as being overrun with choice, we're overrun with the availability of music. So might as well focus on making your CD releases more about your fans, the people who buy the CDs because they love you. Focus on that. Make it a special piece of merch. Make it the must-have piece of merch, and make it come out more than once every 2 years. Why not have it come out every 6 months? Why not have new singles? I mean, let's be honest. If these groups were really following the most productive model, well, they'd just release singles. They wouldn't bother with albums at all. They'd just say, here's our new song, here's our new song, here's our new song, here's our new song. The whole reason, yeah, that would be the most efficient way to do it. But, you know, and each one of them will come out on a CD. But the reason they do it like this now is because it still has that quality. Of course you have your albums, but your mini albums, they still have that quality. You still feel it's an event. You still sit down and listen to it from cover to cover at least that first time. You still get the joy of feeling like this is a new chapter in the band's life. You know? I mean, if everything you release is a single, then there's always the possibility that, you know, what if you want to do something that's a little bit different? Hey, we usually do rock songs. We want to release a ballad. When you release that ballad, are people going to go, cool, a ballad? Or are they going to go, wait, is this a change in direction? Maybe you release one song people don't like. They're like, oh, does this mean that this band's no longer cool? Whereas if you release a mini album, you can be like, well, look, we're going to put at least 1 or 2 surefire bangers on there, but it gives the artist the safety net to put a couple of other songs on there as well, which maybe are a little bit different, allows them the freedom to experiment without being judged as having fallen off. But at the same time, a mini album gives them the ability to do it quickly, efficiently, you know, do the album thing, but without having to sit down and stress over coming up with a full, you know, 12 track era-defining thing. I mean, that's the thing, isn't it? Albums used to come out and it was like, this is the era for this artist. Oh, this is the so-and-so era, name it after the album. This is this era in the band's history. Whereas if you're producing regular mini albums, you're just you. One fluid process of creation that evolves, hopefully, slowly over time. Anyway, those are my thoughts on mini albums and albums. Don't know if there's any big conclusion on there, but I think I covered everything that I said I was going to do at the outset of this video. Wow, I've only been waffling for 12 minutes. Somehow I thought this was going to be longer than most of the other videos on this channel. As always, if you want to hear me talking in a more scripted, concise and thought out format, follow Backer Broadcast. It's linked in the description below. I would say that I've been listening to some EPs. If you want to listen to some EPs, the mini albums, 2 mini albums that I've really loved. As I say, Ace by GACHARIC SPIN is brilliant. Especially as a follow-up to W. It's so cool. I mean, it doesn't just feel like, oh, here's the tracks we had left over. It genuinely feels, again, like it was created as a mini album. And Spice X by TRiDENT that just came out is absolutely superb. Freaking love that. So, yeah, go check that out as well. There are only 5 tracks. A lot of mini albums are 6 tracks. But, hey, get in the comments, tell me what you think about this, and tell me some really great mini albums you've heard as well. I'd love to hear what mini albums have you really enjoyed. Mini albums that felt complete. You know, I love that when you get a mini album that feels like it's done everything an album would do, where it's got all the variation and everything in it. So cool. Anyway, there you go. Those are my thoughts on the subject of mini albums. Get in the comments, tell me what you think, like, subscribe, blah, 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 YouTubery stuff. And until I hopefully see you very soon in Japan for the next one of these. For now. Wait. See, I need to click stop with this hand. This hand, bad clap. Oh, it clapped all right that time. For now. Ciao, ciao. Missed the button anyway.